Don't you love it when things are both easier and more affordable? Like when the rain washes your car for you. Or like when you save up to 10% by bundling your renters and auto insurance with USAA. Bundle with USAA and start saving. Get a quote today.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
From the Fifth Quarter Studio in Madison, Wisconsin, you're listening to the Coaching Youth Hoops Podcast.
They're playing
Basketball.
Here's our hosts, Steve Collins. And Bill Flitter.
What do you believe, or how, or let me, I have a couple questions. So let me start with this one first. What do you wish all coaches knew about what you do on the court?
Something
Maybe one to three things.
1 to 3 things.
Yeah, if you're going to address a group of youth coaches right now,
okay.
I'd love to hear if they knew what we do, then this would help with the relationship. Maybe something like that.
You can't be called for traveling if you're not dribbling the ball. In other words, if you don't have control of the basketball, and we certainly see this numerous times at the high school level, players dribbling the basketball, gets to the front court, they see a double team coming up and they get nervous. It's like, oh man, I'm going to get trapped, and then they don't continue the dribble. That it's like the ball just goes up in the air, floats, whatever. They're still moving. Yeah. The ball's like a hot potato, right?
Like a hot potato, yeah.
And they regain possession and start dribbling, and either dribble their way out of that or stop and look for a kick out, to get the ball out of the double team.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I'll hear a coach yelling, it's like, that's a travel, that's traveling. It's like, no, it's not. Why? Because they weren't dribbling the ball. At the point where they were bouncing, where they were whapping the ball around, without dribbling, there's no traveling.
Yeah.
So that's number one. So you can't travel if you're dribbling the basketball.
That's interesting. Okay, what else? What other advice would you have for coaches? And this is just for the coaches. So then the other question I'm going to ask you is, what can we teach our players that will help you? So that's the follow-up question. So this one is just for the coaches.
Okay. Something that we discussed early on, there is no such thing as over the back.
Okay,
period.
I hear that all game long. And I knew that. I know there's no over the back.
Yeah,
and then I always say, there's no such thing as over the back, right? I'm saying this.
And then,
unless there's a foul.
And then something we discussed about in various scenarios is just because there's contact doesn't mean there's been a foul committed. Either
on
by
both sides,
defense or the offense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, and again, that alludes to people who love to say basketball is not a contact sport.
Right. Yeah.
And I guess you haven't watched much basketball.
Well, I always talk about the hot stove scenario, right? Person in front of me is about to break loose, right? And I can sense it. So I hop back and I kind of hold them, right? I just kind of push them, or not push them. I stick my arm out, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now
one hand on
I think about it as Yeah, I
One
think about it
hand
as a
on the
hot
back,
stove.
what you're describing, as long as you're not displacing them, be careful.
Yeah.
Whenever you say push,
Yeah, I
pushing
know.
is
I'm sorry.
foul.
That's why I corrected myself. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can have
Forgot who I was talking to.
You can have one hand. You can have one hand on the ball handler's back, or even another
Well, in the
offensive
front, I'm
player
thinking even on
who's
the
trying.
front, right? I'm holding them,
Yeah, if you're
right here,
restricting
ready to
their
choke.
movement, then again, you
That's a
advantage,
foul.
disadvantage. You just gained an advantage because they're restricting their movement. But generally speaking, one hand on the back on an offensive player or a defensive player, you can do that all day, all night,
As
if
long
you
as I'm
want.
not,
As
for
long as
sure
you're not displacing them, and that exists at all levels. You see, I mean that's bread and butter at the NBA level. I mean, you're virtually guaranteed on the offensive side, whether you have the ball or not, in the front court, that a defender's going to have a hand on you. So it's all, but they're not displacing. But that's the key. Are they gaining an advantage? Once there's a push, any kind of push or restricting movement, so a block where you're restricting their movement with your body or with your hand, then we have a foul. And again, if it's two hands on the back, and at the high school level, if it's two hands on the back of the ball handler, that's a hand check. That's a hand check. Even if you didn't restrict the movement, NFHS, again, last year it was a POE, a point of emphasis. They're trying to get that completely eliminated at the high school level.
I'm sorry, which one?
Two hands on the back of the ball handler. You do not want two hands on the back of the ball handler, even if they're not displacing ball handler. It's like that's considered a no-no.
I mean, when they have these points of emphasis, a lot of times they're already rules.
Yes,
and they're just kind of they're already in the rule book. They're already
in the rule book, and they're not being enforced. That's a point well taken. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. More often than not, I'd say more than 75% of the time, the POEs that are issued by NFHS in the preseason are, things that this is a rule. It's in the rule book. It needs to be enforced. That's why it's a point of emphasis.
Yeah. Okay. Before I forget, though, I have a third grade player. I said I was interviewing you, and they had a very specific fun question for you too. So this one is for Kata. She asked the question, which is she's got two scenarios. Scenario number one is you're the defender on the offense. I throw the ball between your legs, okay, and I get it on the other side. Is that legal?
Let's see.
Did I stump the ref?
No. Well, you deliberately pass the ball through the defender.
Correct. Through defender's legs. Yeah. And I retrieved it myself.
And you retrieved it yourself. I believe that is illegal because you're passing the ball to yourself.
Illegal,
yes. However, the caveat there is I would have to double check because we're all human, including officials. The fact that the ball made contact with the court first on the floor before you retrieve the ball might make that particular scenario legal.
Yeah.
And if that ball touches any part of that defender, even if it just brushes their leg, it's definitely 100% legal.
Yeah. Okay, what about over the head? I'm assuming then over the head is not legal if I throw it over your head, catch it on the other side of you.
Yeah. Then that's like catching your own your own jump shot. Yeah, catching your own pass. So that's illegal. That's why it leads me to believe that would be illegal. Again, the only caveat would be the fact that it touched the ground first.
Yeah,
because then that can be translated as being a loose ball. In that scenario, you have team control, but you don't have player control.
Right. Yeah.
And that, in real time, unless it's painfully obvious, that's kind of hard to adjudicate that, that player, she deliberately did that.
Right. Versus I'm just trying to pass to my teammate, but oh shoot, she didn't get it in time, and now I'm just going to grab it. Right?
Yeah. Well, see, that's the other thing. Yeah. In adjudicating that, it's like, was she trying to pass that to a teammate? Try to do a pocket pass in between the defender's leg?
Right.
Or was she literally trying to pass to herself? That takes a lot of chutzpah and a lot of skill level to do that, especially at the high school level. So.
That's why this third grader asked it, because she's got both of those. So
okay,
she'll be the next player out of the Moraga area that to play in the WNBA. So you heard it here. Okay. All right. Let's go back then. The other question was, what can we do as coaches to educate our players? Maybe 2 or 3 things specifically that's related to what you see on a regular basis, and maybe some of these you've already brought up, but what are some of those things maybe that you always get looks for from the players, and how can we educate them to work? Well, let's not just to work with you. That's the other question I want to talk about, but more about what can we show them that they need to do better technically, right?
Something we addressed earlier in the conversation, going up in the air, hands up in the air, whistle blows, fist goes up in the air, and they have this bewildered look on their face that I went straight up, and they look at their coach. It's like, I went straight up. And it's like, hands up in the air. And it's like, no, you didn't go straight up. And I can't tell you, it's like a broken record how many times I tell the coach, it's like I called him or her for a block because, they had their hands up in the air, but they went
forward.
They went forward. They didn't go straight up, and they didn't go backwards. So it's very, very difficult for a defender to literally go completely straight up.
Yeah.
Inevitably, human nature is they're going to drift towards ball handler more often. And even if it's just like less than half a foot, if there's any motion towards the shooter, that's a block. If they're moving backwards at any point in time with their hands up in the air, we got nothing every time. Unless the offensive player lowers their shoulder into them, to try and create additional space, which is really dumb because the defender's already moving backwards. Then you got a player control foul for doing that. That would be one of the biggest ones. Get that all the time, virtually at least a couple of times per game.
So what would you suggest we do? Have players teach players just, hands up, feet on the ground. Right? Because boys especially, right? Boys especially always want to jump. I always talk about this, right? As soon as the ball is anything, they're up in the air, they're trying to block the shots, right? Trying to make the highlight reel. So
right. Yeah. Just remember, I would emphasize to them, remember that offensive player is coming towards you, so don't go towards them with your body. Fine to have your hands up in the air. Yeah. And it's fine that you didn't bring your hands down on top of the player because that would be it, but that in and of itself doesn't absolve you from, being called for a foul, because any movement towards that shooter is going to be a blocking foul. So I would say just keep that in mind. If you're going to go up, choose to default to maybe drift backwards towards the basket instead of away from the basket.
Which is hard in itself to even think about when the offensive player is going up. So you hear a lot of coaches just hands up, feet on the ground, right? Just hands straight up, and it's better to them to make 2 points than potentially 3, right, with a free throw.
Exactly.
Foul trouble. So
and you can drift into the shooter too, even if you never leave your feet as a defender.
Well, right. I guess
leaning
you could,
in, by leaning
in
into
too,
right? But my hands were up. You lean.
Yeah, you leaned in.
Sometimes I got to point to the player. It's like, but you hip checked them, or but your torso, went into the shooter's arm, or what have you, or your hand touched the shooting arm of the player who took the shot.
Sure, right.
So that's it. That's a hit, right?
Well, and you see a lot of hip checks too on screens, right? If I'm the screener, you just,
elbow, chicken wing,
elbow, chicken wing,
with the elbow, or a hip check. So if you, any kind of movement, even though both feet are stationary and you've established legal guarding position, any of that kind of drifting, any kind of movement into the player, it's like that's going to be illegal. On the offensive side, yeah, it'll be an illegal screen. The other thing, to additionally answer your question, that I wish coaches would teach their players more often is if you're a defensive player and you know you're going to get beat, it's just like you guessed that the player was gonna move to your left, and instead they move to your right, and so you stick your hand out, and just do an arm bar, cross, and it's like dumb foul, as the expression goes. It's like if you know you're beat, and especially if it's in the first half of the game, you just wasted a foul, a personal foul on you, and you wasted a team foul on your team because you were beat. And if that player proceeds to, like, if they're in the act of shooting when you did that, then they're going to the line if they make the basket, and then you may have given up 3 points instead of 2 points. So in other words, there's a lot of ramifications for making dumb fouls like that early in the game, because if it results in points for the opposing team, and say that opposing team ends up winning by one possession, by 1, 2, or 3 points, sometimes that's the difference in the outcome of the game. And especially if you're considered a key player by the coach, you really shouldn't be making dumb fouls. You should know better, because then you get in foul trouble. In other words, save those fouls for when it's a 1 or 2 possession game. There's like under a minute to go in the game. You have 3 personals on you. Now, if you committed a couple of dumb fouls early in the game because you were frustrated because you got beat, guess what? You just fouled out, right? Because of those 2 dumb fouls. Then you got your 5th foul with less than a minute left in the game. And that's my rationale for that. Just if you got beat and it's not a game situation, the game's not in the line. The game's never on the line in the first half. Let them go. Let them go. I mean, I'll even, sometimes I'll mention that to a player, even like if they've gotten 2 dumb fouls, like in the space of say 2-3 minutes. It's like, hey, Joe or Jill, it's like, let him go. If he got beat, let him go. Let him go, because we're going to call it, especially early in the game. So,
no, that's a good point. No, it's a good way to look at it. And I hope it probably goes on more than I can see. We have to remember, and I know it's hard for us, it's hard for you, it's hard for the parents in the stands. These are kids. They're learning. They're learning the game of basketball. They're learning how to work against adversity and all of the other things that sports brings. And the education piece of that I think is really important. And I love refs who, either tell me or tell my players, hey, that, this is why this is a foul, or this is why I called you, or come over to me and say, hey, Watt, can you have your player look at this or do this, or they're going to, you know what I mean? Like, okay. Unless it's of course, you know what I mean? Like this, we should all be working together for the sake of the kids. Yeah.
And that's why I'll verbalize, things like that. Like, it's like, if you get beat, let them go, especially at the lower levels. I'll say, if you're getting beat, like at the freshman level and even the JV level, that's it. It's like, it's a teachable moment. It's like,
it's a teachable moment. That's right.
Yeah. It's like, let them go. You got beat. It's like, save that foul for when you can really need it or use it. When someone's driving to the basket and you're only up by 2, then that's the time to take that kind of foul. Make them earn it at the line. That's a game situation, but not in the first half, not in the first quarter or the second quarter.
I was at a game the other day, and I have never seen this happen. And I've never seen it happen where the refs weren't calling a lot of stuff, and they were letting the kids play. And it got to a point where I don't know how both coaches came together and went to the refs during the game. So they must have, I don't know how they communicated this, but it was one of the preseason games. So it didn't count, but I don't think that matters too much. But they stopped play to call the refs over and to say, hey, someone's going to get hurt, right? You guys need to dial it up. I mean, normally we don't like getting foul called, but it got to a point where it was starting to be a little bit unsafe because these girls were going at it.
Yeah, I had a game like that last season, as a matter of fact, at Las Lomas. It was a very sloppy girls game, and it got kind of rough and tumble. And the outcome had long since been decided, so it was a blowout. And it was getting physical mainly because neither team was playing good defense. What you just described, typically, neither team's playing good defense. So, they're hip checking players, they're restricting the ball handler from moving. They're trying to trap a player, and they're
Halliday presents in the red corner the undisputed, undefeated weed whacker guy, champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Halliday. Halliday, bring it on.
Out here, there's no one way of doing things. No unwritten rules. And no shortage of adventure. Because out here, the only requirement is having fun. Bank of America invites kids 6 to 18 to golf with us. For a limited time, sign them up for a free 1-year membership, giving them access to discounted tee times at thousands of courses. Learn more at bankofamerica.com/golf with us. What would you like the power to do? Bank of America. Restrictions apply. See BofA.com/golf with us for complete details. Copyright 2025 Bank of America Corporation.
Ball handler, or to be fair, on the other side of the coin, the ball handler is trying to be a bull in china shop and literally dribble through two players that are preventing him or her from getting to the basket. Right. The worst thing you can have in a game is a game for the officials to be blowing their whistles every 5-10 seconds.
Yeah.
So the scenario you described, when that situation occurs, the coaches, it's your team, it's your players. Everybody obviously can see that. We as officials, we like to hint to the coaches. It's you need to tell your players to play better defense. And if they're getting beat, let the players go. No one came here to watch us, the officials, blow our whistles every 5-10 seconds. We'll be here all night long. So without knowing the officials involved and not in that particular game, but appreciating the scenario, they probably just wanted to get the game over with without anybody getting seriously hurt, period. It's this game is going nowhere. Neither team is playing good defense. If we keep blowing our whistle, this game could go on for 2.5, 3 hours. Right? In that scenario, the officials could go up to the coaches and say, look, it's we're not going to stand here and blow our whistle every 10, 15 seconds and just have both teams in the bonus and shooting free throws for the next hour and a half. That's not basketball, right? So please tell your players, knock off the fouls, stop fouling each other. I mean, literally, that's the best way to adjudicate that, not for the coaches, in all fairness, to come up to the referees and say, hey,
that's a good point.
Getting really rough.
Yeah.
So I mean, as an official, I can understand where those officials were probably coming from. It's this is really sloppy play. Neither team's playing good defense. We just want to get this game over with, or hopefully with nobody getting hurt, and just get it over and done with. But what they could have done is go up to the coaches and say, look, it's neither of your teams are playing good defense. You need to tell your teams, your players, to stop fouling.
That's what the refs should have done too, because you know how it goes too. The coaches aren't going to say, "No, you back down. No, you back down," right? Or, "Hey, you got you yes. Right? You guys get to back down, and I'm not going to back down because then I'm going to get beat up." Right? You know what I mean? If I'm just playing, anyway. Yeah, no,
no, you would definitely bring both coaches together in that scenario. Because the game's basically turned into a expletive deleted show.
Yeah. All right, last question for you before we get you out of here. communication. How do you want us coaches to communicate with referees and players for that, man? What can we tell our players, and what can we as coaches do better about communicating with refs?
Tell the players to always maintain composure, be respectful. Don't let your emotions get the best of you. Ditto for coaches. The thing that probably irritates officials, generally speaking, more than anything else, is when coaches start making statements. That was a travel. That's a foul. That's this. That's that. And then they just continue. And it gets to a point where you have to go to what we call, you have to go to your toolbox, and it's like, you need to stop. You need to stop making statements. So we'll always try to make ourselves available to answer a question. And veteran officials will look at a coach and say, "Do you have a question for me? Because if you don't have a question for me, you need to stop making statements." What that boils down to is coaches are there to be a coach, to coach their team, coach their players. When they start making themselves an extra official, it's like, you want to become an official, we can direct you on how to get involved and become an official.
You know what I hear, though, the opposite of that I actually just read it on our Facebook group today. Is there was and I'm not saying this is right, but there was a coach complaining that his assistant coach wasn't sticking up for his team and arguing calls with the ref. And I'm like, okay, one, obviously you got to see the film on that, but to really truly dig deep into that. But at the same point, it's like, okay, I don't think that's the right perspective, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Well, no, and that's not good guidance. And the reason being that, assistant coaches, can end up being a thorn in our side as officials too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Head coach is encouraging the assistant to basically be the bad guy for him or her.
Oh, that
doing
way.
that.
Yeah,
well, guess what?
Yeah.
We're going to whack that assistant coach with a bench technical foul, and at the high school level, guess what, Mr. and Mrs. Head Coach? You just lost your coaching box for the rest of the game. Yeah. Anytime a bench technical is assessed, the head coach loses his or her coaching box for the remainder of the game. And that also counts as an indirect technical foul against the head coach. In any combination of most people know, 2 direct technical fouls assessed against a coach or a player, you're disqualified. That's standard at any level. What you may not know is at the high school level. So what I just described, that scenario, so direct technical against the assistant, that's an indirect against the head coach. Another assistant, he or she shoots their mouth off. That's another direct technical against that other assistant. That's another indirect against the head coach. Now, if the head coach gets assessed another indirect or a direct technical foul, they're gone. So any combination, 3 indirect technical fouls, 1 technical and 2 indirect, or 2 direct technical fouls, and you're gone. You're disqualified. So that's
what about in a situation though? How do you want us to handle this? Here's this situation that happened. I know it just came to me as you were talking about this though. Is there this was last season, there was a point guard. I think she ended up playing some sort of, I think it was Division II, big, tall woman, okay, and a really good ball handler, okay, and she was above average for her age. She was a senior, and we had at average or below average size players, okay, so in order for her to create an advantage, a lot of times what she would do with our players is she would hook them. So as she's dribbling the ball, she'd come across and hook. She did it all game, right? And because of her size and because of our size, she's big, they're small, it would displace them, right?
Yeah.
So
that's an offensive. That's a player control foul.
That is a player control foul.
That's holding. That's a holding foul.
And I wasn't the only one who noticed it. And I ended up getting it. That was my second technical of my 15-year coaching career. I mentioned it to him. And he called it once, and I said, she's continuing to do it, right? And then at some point, I mean, she was just blatantly just dribbling the ball all by herself, just hook. Coaches were pointing out, players kept on coming out of the bench. I saw it, And I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. Like, I got heated. I don't get heated very often. I got heated in that situation. Right now, I know I shouldn't have gotten heated. I got a technical. But at the same time, it's like, this has got to stop. Like, that is complete displacement. Right. So anyway, so in those situations, help me out. What do you do?
Remember what I said about like asking a question? You're always entitled to ask a question. And in the heat of the moment, I mean, we're all human beings. So I get that. Sometimes the best approach in that situation is you're upset. Okay, the official called it once. If you pose it as a question and say, I know you called that earlier in the game. Can you keep your eye on her doing it again? Then you just presented it as a question. Right. And then you're basically communicating the same thing, that she's continuing to do it, but you're presenting it as a question, which begs a response. Right. Can you keep your eye on that player because I believe she's continuing to do the same thing? Mm-hmm. And that's fair. That's a fair statement. I've had players come up to me and say, hey, ref, number 23's been, holding me, restricting my movement. When we're in the front court, can you, keep your eye on it? And I'll say, yeah, it's like, okay, sure. I'll keep my eye on that. Or I may already have been keeping an eye on the offending player. Usually it's low post play. They'll say, hey, so-and-so is like, has his hands all over me in the paint. Can you watch? And it's like, yeah, I've been watching it. So it's border, and I'll tell, if the coach brings that up to me, I'll say, yeah, I'm watching it. It's like, have you been seeing that in the paint? It's like, yeah, I have. And they'll respond with a question. They'll say, so what do you think? And I said, it's borderline. And I'll just be brutally frank. It's borderline. It's close to them getting whacked for a foul. Yeah. So that's answering their question and acknowledging that I'm aware of the situation. So I'm watching it. And when it rises to the level where I feel like I need to, blow my whistle and whack him or her for a foul because they got an advantage by the contact, advantage, disadvantage. Yeah. Advantage, disadvantage.
Right. No, I'm gonna start using that. So advantage, disadvantage. All right. Coach, anything else? Or Mark, anything? I called you coach, but you were a coach. So ref. Anything else that help players, help coaches? Anything else you want to leave with us before we call it a podcast, if you will?
Sure. There's a new term that's come out because advantage, disadvantage has been around for a long time, and some in the know claim that that's an outdated term, but I wholly disagree with that. So I work with a lot of veteran officials, a lot that also worked at the college level, and it's still a basic principle of officiating: advantage, disadvantage. RSBC is like the modern term. So rhythm, speed, balance, control. RSBC, I believe, is the acronym. So anything that disrupts players' rhythm, speed, balance, or control, you got to foul.
Interesting.
Make sense?
Yeah.
RSBC. To me, that's the same as advantage, disadvantage. It's just a more sophisticated way of defining it, if you will. So that's my personal opinion. So, but that's like the modern term in my humble opinion of advantage, disadvantage. So that said, anything else to share? I would say, so many times we see a scenario where a coach is getting on us as officials. And it detracts, it takes away from them coaching their players and their team. I'll never forget, I did a girls' game at Northgate in Walnut Creek about, I want to say probably 3-4 years ago. And I was working with a veteran official, and the visiting team, I can't remember who the visiting team was, but the coach was trailing by double digits for the majority of the game. And so he's getting frustrated. So he started becoming the third official. And he's making statements, that's a travel, that's a foul. Why aren't you calling that? It's like, oh, come on. It's like, where's the foul on that? That should be an N1. And, got to the point where, my partner and I got together during a timeout, and it's like, have you had enough of him? Because I have, my partner, who is a veteran official, goes, have you had enough of him? And I said, yeah, frankly, I have. Yeah. He goes, yeah, me too. He goes, the next time he opens his mouth, we're going to whack him with a bench warning. Because so we've gone to our toolbox. That's the first step the next step is to whack him with a technical foul. So sure enough, shoots his mouth off, tweet our whistle, bench warning, put it in the book, 3:54, third quarter. From that moment on, he put a zipper on it, no more officiating from the bench. He started focusing on coaching his players, and lo and behold, they closed the gap all the way, made it a one-possession game.
Oh, wow.
They ended up winning the game. Ended up winning the game. And a lot of coaches don't realize that your players, especially at the high school and youth level, they're watching you. They see your actions.
That's right.
They see how you're behaving, and it trickles down on them.
That's
and
right.
It affects them. So if you're being, if you're being a poor sport, literally, and if you're just bitching and moaning and complaining at the referees, then the players start to develop. They cop that attitude. And then instead of focusing on playing basketball, they're focusing on every supposed, aggrieved, missed call, violation, travel foul, supposedly that you missed as an official and didn't call. So bottom line is, when the coaches focus on coaching and let us as officials officiate the game, your players ultimately play better. You make yourself a better coach, and everybody wins.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know that, Mark. That's great advice, and I wholeheartedly agree. Again, we're there to set the example for the kids, and in the heat of the moment, of course, sometimes it happens. And I know the coach you're talking about there too. So I'll have a conversation with him. I'll share this with him. Just kidding.
Well, the head coach. Yeah, I know the head coach at Northgate. It wasn't him. It was his opposing coach. So
it was the opposing coach.
It was the opposing coach. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. All right, sir. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts. Hopefully, coaches out there, that was educational. I know that helped me a lot clarify a few things. And good luck this season, Mark.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. And
stay safe.
You as well. I mean, passing comment, always keep in mind that we're human beings too, as officials.
That's right. Yeah.
We're not just robots out there that are trying to wrong you,
you're not?
Trying to make bad calls or whatever. We're human. We're going to make mistakes. So the most veteran of officials will miss a call from time to time. I mean, it happens, but we're human beings at the end of the day. We have to, go home, and go on with our lives as well.
That's right.
All
right, sir. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure, Bill. Thanks for having me and indulging me.
Yeah, we'll have you on again, I am sure, started next season now. Get all the new rules in place and out there. All right.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Take care.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.